you know that the person who is calmer is going to win. In all those movies, it's the one who's like incredibly still, then swipes with his sword incredibly quickly and is then still again. That's the winner, the one who has a Zen state of mind.
The line is this: imagine how effective you would be if you weren't anxious all the time. Why did you put this out? And have you seen highly anxious people become people who experience very little anxiety? Is that something you've seen? But first, why did you put this up? Like, what was behind it? And then have you seen anxious people become largely, I guess, unanxious or non-anxious people?
Yeah, most of my tweets are not very deliberate or thought through. What's happening is I've been thinking about some concept for, months, years, whatever. It's just been percolating. And then all of a sudden it'll come to me sort of in like one pithy sentence where I'm like, oh, this is how I will remember this thing. This is how I can distill this down into a pointer for myself so that when I need to make decisions, I can retrieve that whole line of reasoning. And so where this comes from is basically, like everybody after a certain age, I am taking responsibility for my own happiness and peace and quality of life. And one of the things you learn after you make money is that money doesn't make you happier. It takes care of your money problems, but it's not necessarily going to put you in a place where you're in some kind of bliss all the time. In fact, there's nothing out there that will make you happy forever. So you sort of have to take responsibility for guiding yourself in such a way that your mental state ends up where you want it. And so I've been working on my mental state, and I have, working is a big word. I don't even want to say I've been working on it, but I would say my mental state has gotten to a place which is much better than it used to be. And people will often say, well, I don't want to do that because it'll take away my ambition. I want to succeed right now. And so I've thought about that a fair bit. And is that true or not? Well, certainly for me in the last few years, since I've become calmer, my effectiveness has gone through the roof and I've been more successful. But it's hard to disambiguate that from, well, also maybe you're just later in your career, you're in a better position for it. And that's a valid criticism. So one of the things I've been trying to figure out is like, would I have been as successful? And it's hard to do the counterfactual, obviously, if I wasn't as anxious, because anxiety is, comes from fear, and it's also a motivator. It makes you get off your butt. And one of the ways to make the anxiety go away, at least until the next piece of anxiety comes along, is to go do something about it. So what is the role of anxiety? Well, firstly, I noted that pretty much everybody's anxious all the time. It's a rare human being who isn't anxious. And it makes sense. We're alpha predators. We took over this earth and domesticated or killed all the other animals. And we did that by being the most paranoid, the most fearful, the most angry predators this world has ever seen. So anxiety is built into the core of who we are. In fact, you could argue that all the mind does all day long is fear-based scenario planning for survival, and then maybe a little bit of greed for replication. So anxiety is at the core level of who we are. But certainly some people are more anxious than others. There's no question. And some people seem to be much calmer about it. So which is more useful for effectiveness? So assuming that your goal is your motivation is intrinsic, you're doing the thing because you love it or because you really want it, and you can separate that motivation from anxiety, then I think you can take on certain superpowers. And we kind of all intrinsically know this. Like if you look at, samurai warriors, right? Like Miyamoto Musashi is in a duel with somebody else. You know that the person who is calmer is going to win. In all those movies, it's the one who's incredibly still, then swipes with his sword incredibly quickly and is then still again. That's the winner, the one who has a Zen state of mind. Similarly, in the Terminator movies, part of the reason you fear the Terminator is because he's a robot. He's unstoppable. He's implacable. You can't argue with him. You can't communicate with him. You can't make him slow down. And he has no remorse. He just keeps coming. Or in that old Clint Eastwood movie, Unforgiven, the guy who wins the gunfight is the one who doesn't flinch. He's just keeping his cool while he's loading his gun and shooting. He's not like all over the place running around. So I just think we waste so much energy through anxiety that if you can be calm and still go about your business, it's a superpower. And I realized this myself recently, where I was in a conflict situation in business. It was a high conflict situation. It was unfortunate. I think we've solved it. But as I went through this high conflict situation, I'd been through one like it years before where I was much more anxious. And I remember that time period. And I remember how much I was sweating it and how nervous I was and how I went through bouts of fear and anger and how kind of worked up I was the entire time, intense, and didn't get much sleep. But this time I was incredibly calm. And I was almost enjoying it because it was like practicing my craft. Now, of course, it's easier to do now because I have more money, but at the same time, it just didn't bother me. It was just very mechanical. And because of that, I could be very effective about it. And I could be effective about it while doing lots and lots of other things. My mind wasn't constantly spinning in a whirlpool, taking on 10 different problems and just fear-based scenario planning all the time. Most of these things were never going to happen. So I do believe that being calm and still going about your business is the superpower. Now, yes, if anxiety is your only motivator, then you have a problem. But I would argue the pure motivations don't come out of anxiety.
So let's talk about attribution here. To what would you attribute and I know this, that it's difficult to isolate variables, et cetera, but if, let's just say, like, you have a family. So let's just say one of your kids comes to you. It's like, Dad, I'm suffering from a lot of anxiety. What should I do? Or you observe it and you want to help your kid out. What types of recommendations would you make, or might you make? Another question, if you prefer it, is what has helped you to go from the whirlpool experience of anxiety in high conflict experience round one versus calm Naval in high conflict experience round two?
Yeah, it's really hard to separate all the pieces out. I mean, it comes from a combination of philosophy, yoga, meditation, getting older, having kids. Like you, I've had some psychedelic experiences, but those are very far back in the past, just a distant memory at this point. But I would say the number one thing that has been very, very important for me is meditation. And it's a stupid thing to say because it's so trite. Everybody just says it now. But when I say meditation, I don't mean sitting there and watching your breath or chanting a mantra. I mean self-examination. And meditation is a great way to do that. It's self-therapy. It's sitting there with your thoughts. So anxiety, this pervasive, non-specific anxiety, where you're just constantly on edge about everything, that comes from an unexamined life. I think was it Socrates said, like, an unexamined life is not worth living. I forget who said that quote.
Something like that.
Yeah, but it's a great,
Aristotle, Socrates, one of those.
Yeah, one of those smart philosopher types. But it's correct. It's your unexamined life that is causing the problems. And you can examine it in multiple ways. You can examine it through, you can have some crazy mushroom trip where it all comes out one night. You could do a lot of meditation, sitting there with yourself and letting your mind run crazy, and then seeing what's actually in your mind that your mind wants to tell you and have you listen to and have you resolve that is unresolved. It could be through therapy. It could be through reading lots of philosophy and reflection and long walks. So there's many, many ways to tackle it, but it's that spending that time with yourself to examine, why are you having these thoughts? Think about it this way. We spend so much time in our relationships with our wives, our relationship with our colleagues, our relationship with our business partners, our relationship with our friends. The most important relationship you have is with yourself. It's with this voice in your head that is constantly rattling every waking hour. It's this crazy roommate living inside your mind who's always chattering, never shuts up. And you can't control these thoughts. They just come up out of, you don't even know where. That quality of your thoughts, those conversations you're having in your head all the time, that is your world. That is the world you live in. That's the worldview you have. That's the lenses you see through. And that's going to determine the quality of your life more than anything else. And if you want to see what the quality of your life actually is, put down the drink, put down the computer, put down the smartphone, put down the book, put down the headphones. Just sit by yourself doing nothing. And then you will know what the quality of your life actually is, because that's what you're always running away from. That's why people, when they try to meditate, they sit down like, I hate it. I can't sit still. Why? Because your mind is eating you alive. Your life is unexamined. Your mind is running in loops over things that it has not resolved. And because they're not resolved, when you run around in your normal life, it's not those problems have gone away. It's that they're just there. They're there, but they're provoking anxiety. And what you think of as the anxiety that's kind of consuming you, and you can't identify the source, that's just the tip of an iceberg poking out from underneath the water. And underneath is this giant pile of garbage, of decisions that were made without too much thought, of situations that you're in that you haven't resolved, that you need to resolve, of problems that you have or desires that you have that have gone unmet or unmanifested, or contradictions that you're living in, or ways that which you feel trapped. So proper meditation, proper examination should ruin the life that you're currently living. It should cause you to leave relationships. It should cause you to reestablish boundaries with family members and with colleagues. It should cause you to quit your job. It should cause you to change your eating patterns. It should cause you to spend more time with yourself. It should cause you to change what books you read. It should cause you to change who your friends are. If it doesn't do that, it's not real examination. If it doesn't come attached with destruction of your current life, then you can't create the new life in which you will not have the anxiety.
Or at least parts of it, not necessarily whole cloth. So let's dive into meditation, because as you mentioned, it's a term that is used a lot, and in the minds of most, it is represented by things that you just said you do not do, like the mantra-based meditation or following the breath. And you and I have meditated before. I don't know if your approach is still similar, but it is quite a, I hate to talk about trite, paradigm shift in a sense, at least in the way that I experienced it alongside you at one point, which was literally doing nothing for extended periods of time. I don't know if that's still the case, but could you describe the practice a bit? Because it was such a burden lifted, in a sense, when the pass fail is removed. And the experience that I had after, say, a week of doing this twice a day, which is not necessarily what people would do in normal life, but was pretty profound. So could you describe the current practice, which may be different from what I experienced?
Yeah, I actually have two different things that I do. And I almost hate calling it meditation because everyone has in their mind a preconceived notion of what meditation is. Let's not even call it that. I would say that there are two self-examination practices that I do. And I don't even call them practices anymore, because sometimes I do them because I feel like them and I enjoy them, or because it feels right, and sometimes I don't. Because anything done routinely sort of becomes its own trap and is not going to get you anywhere. It just becomes like another spiritual high, another checkbox, right?
Now, is it fair, though, to say that you're able to opt in and out now because you had a certain front-loading period
Correct.
of doing it consistently?
Yeah. Actually, I'll say there are three different things that I do, and I'll go through them. The first is I just read a lot of philosophy, especially at nighttime before I go to bed.
Which ones? Schopenhauer, Maxims? Who are we talking about?
Yeah, Schopenhauer, Western philosophy is my current favorite, although I've definitely moved around in that one. Eastern philosophy, I'll read everything from Osho. I know he's discredited and been canceled, but fantastic. That makes me like him even more. Krishnamurti, I don't know, Kapil Gupta, Rupert Spira. I mean, it's all over the place. Anthony DeMello, he's fantastic, actually. I'm going to start with one book, start with Anthony DeMello's Way to Love, or his book Awareness. They're both really good. But there's a ton of them. I basically read a lot of philosophers: Siddhartha, Vasishtha's Yoga, Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching. I'm always going through one of these books at any given time, and usually rereading for inspiration. And I'll read these at night. Usually there'll be one or two things I'll catch on to. I'll reflect on it before I go to sleep. So that is a form of self-examination, and it's not done because it's a formula. It's done because I'm genuinely interested in these things. So it's not work to me. It's fun. The second thing that I do is, which I've been doing for a long time now, is just trying to be aware of my thoughts, and not in a, sit there and be like, oh, I'm going to be aware of my thoughts kind of way, but just realizing that a lot of these thoughts that come up are unbidden. I don't control them. It's not like I decided to have this thought. I don't even know what I'm saying to you right now. It's coming out of my mouth at the same time as I'm thinking it. So where is this coming from? Who is this person? What is this person saying? Is this true? Is it correct? Has he been correct in the past? Is he just being paranoid now? Is he being crazy? What are his underlying motivations? And I'm not even questioning it so much, but more just kind of seeing it. And after a while, when you see it, you start seeing through your own BS. You start seeing how you're mainly just justifying whatever the heck you want to believe because it's good for your survival, or it's good for your replication, or it's good for your money, or it's going to get you laid, or any of these various things. And
when you're doing that reflection, is it sitting at a table, pen and paper? Is it sitting in half lotus with your eyes closed? What is
no?
That?
It's literally just walking around. It's just walking around. It's just life. It's just life.
Mm-hmm.
Just if you say something to me, I'm always going to listen to it with a slightly critical filter because you're external to me. Applying that same filter to my own thoughts gives me a level of peace and distance from them, and the ability to see through my own BS, which I think makes my life better. So I've
Mhm.
just found that to be a useful way of life. But there are lots of times where I forget to do it. I get caught up in some emotion, some runaway train of thought. But usually these days I can catch myself and be like, oh, okay, I'm in that mindset again. I'm having that mode of reactions again. And when the mind sort of sees me chattering, it quiets down a bit, right? And like I said, it's that back to that crazy roommate analogy, which I originally picked up from Michael Singer, by the way. He has a good book called The Untethered Soul. But the crazy roommate analogy, like you would eventually tell your roommate to shut up, or you would tell them to start justifying their claims, or you would at least at some level you start dismissing them for just kind of rambling all the time in this fear paranoid mode. So I think just kind of viewing your thoughts as sort of these unbidden things that arise from within you, but aren't really necessarily the whole story and should be viewed with the same level of skepticism that you would apply to an outside observer. I think that framework is helpful. And if you find it to be true, then you'll find yourself doing it more often. If you find it not to be true, if you're like, no, actually, I choose these thoughts and I want to have them and that's who I am and this all makes sense to me, then you can stop viewing it with a critical eye. That's up to you. But the last one is the one that I think people think of as more traditionally meditation, which is sitting down and meditating. And on that one, I learned from an Indian gentleman, same character you learned from, who had a very simple system, and I just found it the most compelling form of meditation I've ever tried, which is you sit there for 60 minutes. So unfortunately, not less than an hour at a time, because it takes 30 to 40 minutes to sink in past the initial chattering. So you get to the good part, or the so-called runner's high equivalent. And you sit for 60 minutes every day, and you do it for at least 60 days, and you do it first thing in the morning when your mind is clear and you're alert and you've had a good night's sleep. And you sit up with your back straight, and you can use cushions or you can use a chair or whatever. There's no magic position. And just whatever happens, happens. Whatever your mind wants to do, you just let it do. If it wants to talk, you let it talk. If it wants to fight, you let it fight. If it wants to be quiet, you let it be quiet. If it wants to chant a mantra or pay attention to breathing, you can do that, but you don't force anything. You just kind of let it happen. And so you don't fight it, you don't resist it, you don't argue with it, you don't double down on it. You just kind of let things happen. And when you do that, for at least 60 days, my experience has been that you kind of clear out your mental inbox, and all the craziness that was going on, all the chattering will come out. Some problems will get resolved. You will have some epiphanies. You will make changes to your life. Some will be self-examination. Some of it you just get tired of. Some of it just needs to be heard once and then it goes away. And eventually you'll get to a mental state of inbox zero, where now you're just thinking about what happened yesterday. You're kind of caught up and your mind is relatively clear. And just your anxiety level goes down. You're living more peacefully. And I've been doing this for about 2.5 years now. And I've probably missed about a dozen days total. But there are some days where I've done 2 hours a day or more. And I will tell you that it is the single most important thing that I do. It is a sheer joy. Much of it is highly entertaining, pleasurable. Sometimes it's just flat. It's nothingness. I can't even tell you why I do it. I can't even tell you what's going on in that state. But I will tell you that that time spent by myself is the most important time that I have. And thanks to that, I am now much more self-contained. I don't feel like I need other people. I don't need external sources of pleasure or happiness all the time. I drink less. I'm not attracted to trying any drugs whatsoever. It's just life is easier. It's more pleasant. I don't take things as seriously. I'm not afraid of my mortality as much anymore. I don't fear aging. I don't lust after things. I don't have this constant pervasive need to find something outside of me to make my life better. When the best hour of my day is spent by myself, then the world has very little to offer me. And I can still participate in it, but it doesn't have that grip on me that it used to. I don't fear solitary confinement. And I think that is a superpower. And I think everyone should have it. Everyone does have it. It's easy. It requires doing nothing. It's your birthright. You can't fail at it. There's no way to fail at it. Literally, all you have to do is just sit down and close your eyes and just give yourself a break for an hour every day. Just take the time off from the world.
Few follow-ups. Krishnamurti, do you have any favorites of his, or anything that you would suggest someone start with if they have no familiarity with Krishnamurti? And I'll second Anthony DeMello also.
Yeah, I actually don't recommend starting with Krishnamurti. He's a tough one. But if you're going to start somewhere, I started with this book called Think on These Things. There's also the Book of Life. He's very cerebral, very intellectual, and a little confusing. But he definitely speaks truth, and he walks the walk. Anthony DeMello, The Way to Love, Osho's book, The Great Challenge. And I know people think Osho's a fake guru and all that, but he had some real stuff too. He's very articulate. He understood a lot. There's a great clip from him on SoundCloud that says, it's called "Life Has No Goals, No Purpose." I listen to that one a lot. There's a lot of them out there. Once you start going down this rabbit hole, you'll find them. The classics, the Bhagavad Gita, get a good translation. Stephen Miller, I think, has a good translation. He also has a good translation of the Tao Te Ching. Those are both really interesting. Again, only if it appeals to you. I mean, there's ancient wisdom in Schopenhauer. Read Counsels and Maxims. These are smart people self-reflecting. But overall, the point is not to read. The point is to inspire so that you yourself can reflect. Kapil Gupta is an accountant on Twitter. He has a couple of great books. Direct Truth is a fantastic book, written very recently and pulls no punches. But all of these are basically there to inspire you to self-reflect. And if you're not interested in self-reflection, if you're not at that stage in life, then don't do it. It's a waste of time. In fact, I would say the reason to do these things is just because they make your life better, because they make you more effective, because they have some utility to you. If they do not have utility to you, if they don't make your life better, then drop it. It's useless.
I will also second the reading of philosophy. And this is not for kind of idle or abstract, like semantic tail chasing, right? It's for whatever reason, on a very pragmatic level, deeply soothing to read the insights and observations of those who are considering things that are not of today. They're not of this week. They're not of this month. They are for much broader periods of time, or timeless in some capacity, right? It alleviates some of the manufactured emergency and urgency of the bullshit that is foisted upon us by every possible input.
Oh, yeah, the news and Twitter are so toxic. The human brain is not designed to manage every emergency in the world in real time. We're not designed to process all the breaking news on the planet in our heads. And this is one of my recent tweets, but the goal of the media these days is to make every problem your problem. That's how they get attention. That's how they get clicks. You have tribal wars going on, zombies battling each other, and they want to pull you in, where even non-participation is not allowed anymore. Neutral bystanders are not allowed. So it's a crazy world out there. There's a circus going on with the monkeys flinging feces at each other, and they want to drag you into the fight. Really, what you want to focus on is what's timeless. Timeless is great. The old questions all have old answers, and they're best consumed from the old practitioners because they were very clear-minded about it. They weren't busy trying to fit into the politics of this time. They were fitting to the politics of that time, but that's lost to us now. So actually, another great source is I have your Tao of Seneca series on Audible, and I listen to it on repeat when I'm working out a lot. So that's a very
no kidding.
Yeah, the awesome. Letters to Lucilius, amazing stuff. And every time I go through it, I learn something new.
Yeah, the Tao of Seneca, the moral letters to Lucilius. If people want to look on public domain sources, you can find these letters. The moral letters to Lucilius, also spelled as you might read Lucilius, by Seneca. And so that's an audiobook series that I produced, and you can find the PDFs for free online as well.